When the town smells like beer, we know there will be new victims. Story writer located. I live in a place named Tattletoo, where death smells like cinnamon, and life smells like nutmeg. Today, however, hop and malt are predominating the town as it is the day of our annual beer festival. And the head of our town had big plans for it. The crowds had gathered on the streets. The last few preparations were being taken care of. Long tables were reaching all over the marketplace. Children were running around and playing while the adults were working hard to make sure that everything looked perfect. Around the tables, on the corners of the marketplace were beer carts which were only there for the day. There were 7 in total, each one serving a different kind of lager, pilsner, or craft beer. Next to the drink carts were exactly 7 food booths ranging from hearty meat and potatoes to sweet candy and salty pretzels. Everything had been imported in advance and naturally not been produced in Tattletoo. I loved the beer festival. It wasn't the only time we came together to celebrate, but it was one of our most joyous days next to the regular holidays. I would go as far as to say that the beer festival was my second favorite day. This year, however, it felt tainted. I was in no way the naive girl I used to be last year. I had become an adult working in a place that spreads out the smell of death. And soon I would be joining the town committee. A group of martyrs who burn anyone who doesn't obey the rules of our town. Of course, first I had to prove worthy by taking care of the outsider who had come to town. This doesn't happen often, so of course many people were watching us with curious looks. Nobody dared to ask out front who he was or where he came from. A couple understood that the head of our town, Mr. V, had brought him along, and that was all they needed to know. Possibly he could be a victim for the town. Maybe a sacrifice, though for who we didn't know. You're not even asking why I look the way I do. Is this something you're used to here? Of course I had been wondering why he looked the way he did. His clothes ripped and tainted. His face all bloody and bruised. I shrugged. You didn't ask why my arm is broken either. I did assume a few options there. You either had a work accident, although I know you work in a bakery, and people don't break their arms often in bakeries. Maybe you fell down during a game or while doing some sort of sport, but I doubt you have a lot of free time for shenanigans like that. So I assume you got it the same way I got mine. I stopped walking and pulled the man closer to the side of the streets, away from curious ears. Although I knew that whatever we said was by a big chance being recorded. So Mr. V didn't do this to you? I whispered. He laughed. Not directly, but he also didn't care to tell me about the weird rules you have here. I have to admit, not asking questions is unbelievably difficult for me. There is nothing more important than questioning everything and everyone. You have to stay critical, but it seems they forbid you to have a mind of your own here. I didn't understand whether this was some sort of trick to test my loyalty. A way to examine whether I would start talking badly about Tattletoo. Will you be leaving with Mr. V tomorrow? He laughed again, but this time it sounded much more bitter. No. I don't think I will be leaving anytime soon. I nodded. The tone in his voice told me what I needed to know. He was a prisoner here. I took a deep breath to collect my courage and asked straight out. Why did he pick you to come? The guy turned towards me. He seemed a lot calmer now. You don't have to be afraid to ask questions anymore. At least to some degree. He picked you to be on the committee because he believes you are smarter than the people running it at the moment. They won't harm you. As to me, Mr. V, as you call him, picked me up at a bar and asked me politely to come and join him on this trip. I raised an eyebrow in disbelief. I didn't care how friendly Mr. V acted, something was awfully wrong with him. We go way back, him and I. We hadn't met personally before, but I've been up in his business for a while now. I knew one of his little helpers very well. Helper? As what I'm going to be? He shrugged. As we're both going to be, I guess. By the way, he held out his hand. You can call me Josh. Deborah. We got Josh some clothes at the marketplace and visited the barber. He was undeniably impressed by everything he saw. It was like watching a child in a candy store. His eyes were big and sparkly, like he couldn't believe what kind of little wonderland he had stumbled upon. Or well, been pushed into. Can we go to one of the shops next? I really want to talk to that doll maker. He seems so wonderfully odd. No. I almost shouted. I guess they didn't tell you about those rules either. You can't buy any of the products made in the shops, they're only for export. Those dolls have teeth and human hair and strangle you in your sleep if you don't pay enough attention to them. Wow, he whispered. So everything sold here is somehow cursed. I shrugged. It's punishment. I heard one of the exporters started drinking juice from the lemons he needs to send away. He's become the mere shell of his former self since. Alright, wait, do you know what I find most astonishing? Sure, yeah, the stuff you make here is demonic in some way, but nobody here uses it. All the things the people that live here consume are ordinary, no magic whatsoever. Why does everyone here obey? Why do the people make things that will kill others if they know something is wrong? He was on a real roll, and in my opinion he seemed a little too excited analyzing our lives here, but to be fair, his questions were not uncalled for. The people that try to escape die a horrible death. The others like living in their little wonderland, I finally said. The town had the distinct cinnamon smell again. I felt like throwing up all day, but at least today the smell wasn't due to any deaths, at least as far as I knew. Mr. V had ordered for Mrs. Holly to bake enough cinnamon rolls for the entire town. He called it an experiment, but what he actually wanted to test wasn't clear to me just yet. When I told her the news, Mrs. Holly looked both shocked and disgusted. Never before had she made anything with cinnamon flavor for the townspeople, not even for a festivity. It was plain wrong, we both could tell. For a week we'd been making cinnamon for the death. Every single day there had been a new victim for the crematorium, and now on the day that nobody died, he wants the town to have the smell again. Mrs. Holly was fuming. I had never seen her like this before. It was as if she had lost all her calmness in one. Still, she complied and spent the entire night baking. I wasn't there to help as I had to take care of our newcomers, and even though I trusted Mrs. Holly, a part of me was afraid she was filling the cinnamon rolls with an excessive amount of the nutmeg poison. Or maybe she didn't even have to. We didn't know what eating the cinnamon would do at all. Mr. V could have lied. The sun was beginning to set when Josh and I made our way to the marketplace. Purple garlands were hanging from the buildings, fairy lights were spread on the tables, making everyone's faces light up in the dark light. There was a small Ferris wheel and even a carousel. They looked just like the miniature ones the doll maker had created in his store. The shops were locked up, but the lights inside were still on, showing off the wonderful storefronts the owners had been creating over the days. The townspeople had already assembled and most were sitting on the tables. In front of them I saw a big basket spread around evenly. They were filled with the cinnamon rolls. So far nobody had dared to touch them. There was one more table in the front on a stage. In the middle of it sat Mr. V, and next to him were 2 empty seats saved for Josh and me. The rest of the committee, however, was spread around the other tables with notepads and pens. The cinnamon rolls will kill them, I whispered. No, that would be too easy, Josh responded. We reluctantly walked up the stage. Mr. V was talking to the people at the moment, and everyone was cheering and clapping. When he announced that everyone is free to eat the cinnamon rolls, and that consuming them will not lead to a visit to the crematorium, an eerie silence broke down. Mr. V laughed out loud. Please, friends, don't be afraid to go after your desires. I know many of you are longing for the cinnamon, and tonight I want to fulfill that need for you. Eat, drink, enjoy, for tonight there are no consequences. It didn't take long for people to start feasting on the cinnamon rolls. Many were stuffing their faces with as much as they could, only a few didn't touch any of it. When I spotted my parents in one of the corners, eating the rolls with enormous smiles on their faces, I jumped up. My heart was racing and I was about to run down and push them out of their hands. If there was a chance there was poison in there, I couldn't let them do this. However, Mr. V held me back before I could jump down. "You're killing them," I shouted with tears in my eye. He smiled kindly and shook his head. "You're lucky your parents chose to eat the forbidden fruit. The ones who didn't touch it are the ones we need to have an eye on. You're choosing future victims. People who are prone to disobey. That's what those people are writing down," Josh mumbled. Seeing the happy and healthy faces of my parents and all the others eating the cinnamon rolls gave me a sickening feeling. I fell down back to my seat. "Our people have been conditioned, my dear Deborah. They understand very well what death smells like, and today they showed us that they enjoy the scent of it."